Hello there, and welcome to another quiet journey into the forgotten past. Tonight, let's drift backward, not just by centuries, but by tens of thousands of years, to a time before cities, before agriculture, before writing, before even the idea of history itself. Back then, the world was colder, wilder, us, and more populated with kinds of humans that no longer walk among us. We call ourselves Homo sapiens, the wise man. But we weren't always the only ones. Long ago, we shared the earth with others. Neanderthals, with their broad bodies built for ice and snow. Denisovans, mysterious and mostly silent in the archaeological record, and even stranger cousins. Tiny, island-bound humans with unique gifts of their own. They looked different, but they made fire, shaped tools, cared for one another, buried their dead. And in many ways, they were just as human as we are. This story isn't about winners and losers. It's about closeness. Shared fires, shared blood, a quiet reminder that we are not the end of a line, but a branch among many. So settle in. Maybe you're under a blanket. Maybe the lights are low. Wherever you are, let the stillness of deep time wash over you. Let's begin with what life was like. When we lived among our cousins, long before writing, before kings, before roads, or even woven cloth, there was just survival. And into that ancient wilderness stepped many kinds of humans. Imagine waking up in a world where the air is sharp and clean, where mammoths roam open plains, and the sky feels endlessly wide. You are not alone in this world, but your tribe is only one among several. There are others. People who don't speak your language, people with slightly different faces, tools, and customs, but people nonetheless. Neanderthals lived mostly in what we now call Europe and parts of Western Asia. Their bodies were thick with muscle, their hands broad and strong. They had shorter limbs, not built for speed, but for warmth and power. They hunted large game and knew how to make fire. They lived in small family groups, moved with the seasons, and often made their homes in caves or temporary shelters of hide and bone. And then there were the Denisovans. We know less about them. Their bones are rare, mostly teeth, a finger here, a sliver of skull there, but their DNA lingers. A whisper inside the bodies of people living today in parts of Asia, Oceania, and the highlands of Tibet. They were quiet, perhaps, but they mattered. And even farther afield, in places like Indonesia, archaeologists found something stranger still. Tiny humans, barely a meter tall, who lived on islands long before Homo sapiens arrived. They made stone tools. They hunted small animals. We call them Homo floresienses. But once they simply called the island home. These were not monsters or myths. They were people. Not quite us, but not so far removed either. They shared the world with us. For tens of thousands of years. And in those ancient forests and valleys, it's very likely that eyes met across campfires. That trade happened. That fights broke out. That friendships were formed. And maybe on some quiet nights, even love. Because the rhythms of life, hunger, warmth, family, they echo through all kinds of humans. And in the deep past, those rhythms overlapped. In the ancient world, movement was everything. People followed rivers, game trails, the shifting seasons. Over generations, bands of Homo sapiens wandered farther and farther from Africa, into deserts, across grasslands, into dense forests, and eventually into lands where they were no longer the only humans. They met others. Sometimes those meetings were brief. A wary glance, shared watering hole, a retreat into the trees. But other times, those meetings led to something more lasting. Used to think that modern humans simply replaced the other species, outcompeted them, survived better, pushed them to extinction. But the truth is more complicated and more human. Genetic evidence tells us that interbreeding happened more than once, more than rarely. If you're listening to this now, it's likely you carry fragments of their DNA, perhaps a stretch of Neanderthal genome in your immune system, or a Denisovan gene that helps regulate oxygen at high altitudes, something passed down and preserved in the people of Tibet and parts of Melanesia. These weren't just passing encounters. They were unions. Sometimes brief, sometimes meaningful, sometimes repeated over generations. Not just in bones, but in the biology of us. and they left marks. It's humbling to think of it, that inside your blood, there may be echoes of other humans. People who no longer walk the earth, but whose voices, however faint, still murmur in your cells. There's beauty in that. Not dominance, not conquest, but connection. And maybe it wasn't always romantic or kind. Maybe some encounters were born of necessity, or power, or confusion. But some, we'd like to imagine, came from curiosity. From reaching out in a dark world and finding someone different, but not so different. Others perhaps not. Children would have been born from these unions. Some may have survived. But over time, those children became bridges, and eventually us. We didn't just outlive the others. We absorbed them. And even as their bones turned to dust, something remained. A twist of DNA here. A shared tool design there. A burial site with artifacts that hint at influence from more than one culture. The story of humanity is not a ladder. It's a web. And in the ancient threads of that web, you'll find handprints that belong to many. Picture a cave. Its mouth opens quietly beneath a rock shelf, the entrance darkened by time. Inside, the air is cool and still, and on the walls, faded shapes begin to appear. Lines, handprints, animals. Simple maybe, but deliberate. Made with care and with meaning. We once believed only Homo sapiens made art. That we alone carried the spark of imagination, of story, of ritual. But the evidence says otherwise. In Spain, a cave painting dated to over 64,000 years ago shows a red hand stencil, older than any known Homo sapiens art in the region. And the only humans known to be there at the time were Neanderthals. They didn't just survive. They expressed. They created. Beads, carved bones, ochre pigments, and etched patterns have been found across Neanderthal sites. They may have adorned their bodies, painted their shelters, or marked significant objects with symbols we still struggle to understand, and they buried their dead. Graves have been found with care, bodies curled gently, sometimes accompanied by tools or animal bones. In one case, flowers. Why bury the dead if you do not feel something about death? Why place them gently, if not out of respect or grief? These were not creatures stumbling blindly through survival. They were thinking, feeling, remembering people, like us. As for the Denisovans, their archaeological footprint is faint, like a soft track in melting snow. But in the cold caves of Siberia, we've found fragments of them. Teeth the size of walnuts, a sliver of pinky bone. And near them, tools of remarkable precision. Bracelets carved from greenstone, shaped so smoothly they reflect light. Drilled with holes so fine, it suggests the use of tools we didn't think they had. What story sat behind those bracelets? Was it a gift? A mark of status? A farewell? We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is that beauty mattered. Even in the struggle of ancient life, where cold, hunger, danger loomed, humans found time to shape meaning into their world. Around fires, stories may have been told, not in the languages we know, but with rhythm, gesture, tone. Maybe they sang, maybe they chanted. Maybe they simply listened, letting silence speak. The flicker of firelight on stone, the hush of a cold cave. The comfort of someone near, breathing in rhythm. This was their world, soft, harsh, and full. Not primitive, not lesser, just different. And achingly human. The other human species are gone now. Their bones rest in caves. Their tools lie buried beneath layers of earth. Their stories mostly lost to silence, and yet they are not entirely gone, because their traces remain, not just in museums or excavation logs, but in us. Their genes live on, in the lining of your lungs, in the strength of your bones, in how your body responds to cold, to hunger, to elevation. They linger in our DNA, quiet passengers carried through time. We often imagine human history as a straight line, a single torch passed from ancestors to us, glowing brighter with each generation. But the truth is softer, wider, less tidy. It's a story of branches, not ladders, crossings and minglings and vanishings. We did not replace our cousins, not fully. We folded them in. Through the Neanderthals, we inherited patience and resilience. the ability to survive bitter cold, to endure deep injury, to care for one another in silence. Through the Denisovans, we gained gifts we still don't fully understand. Genetic adaptations that allow Highlanders to breathe thin air, and hints of a presence more vast than the fragments they left behind. Even the smallest among them, like Homo floresiensis, remind us that intelligence and community don't belong only to the tall or the dominant. They belong to whoever listens, whoever adapts, whoever stays. In a way, we are all blended humans, threads from many looms woven over thousands of years. And when we look up at the stars, or feel the warmth of a campfire, or hold a child's hand, we carry echoes of others who once did the same. Maybe that's the quiet truth, that even as their footprints fade from the soil, they continue. In the rhythm of our breath, in the shape of our lives, we are not alone. We never were. So now, here we are. The fires are long cold. Bones rest deep in the soil. The caves are quiet once more. But you've been there, if only in your mind. You've walked ancient trails. You've sat in the flickering hush beside those who came before us. You've heard their silence and found meaning in it. And maybe now, as you lie back, eyes soft, breath slow, you feel something different. A kind of closeness to the past. Sense that time is not so distant, that we are not so separate. That the story of who we are is made of many voices, not just one. Neanderthal, Denisovan, sapiens, cousins, all of us, struggling, hoping, creating, fading, and continuing. Let that thought settle gently, like snow falling on stone, like firelight dimming in the night. Let it drift, soft and slow, until even this story becomes a quiet dream. Good night. Thank you for listening.